Well, I tell you what, if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us an introduction to yourself and telling us a little about yourself, and then we'll kind of just get into all the sports because I've seen your Instagram, I've looked at your CrossFit interests, and I saw some swimming stuff in there too. And let's just jump in and we'll have you introduce yourself and go from there.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Sarah Evans. I live in Florida. I'm married with two boys. They're about to turn 8 and 6. So, two little kiddos that take up a lot of my time these days. But previously, I served in the Air Force as a finance officer, was stationed in Montana. And during my time in the service, I was diagnosed with stage 3 osteosarcoma, which is a very aggressive form of bone cancer. They found it while I was overseas. I was on a year-long deployment in Kabul, Afghanistan, and started to experience some weird symptoms. I was 26 at the time. Best shape of my life, was running and doing P90X with my office and doing all the things. Felt great. Had really looking back on it, I was very healthy, no real symptoms. But for some reason, every time I would put on the body armor and the vest and the helmet and the backpack with the binders and the rifle and would, go to various meetings outside of our little compound, I was limping a little bit, which was concerning. And the only symptom I truly had was weakness in my left leg. It wasn't painful. It's just my left leg wasn't keeping up. And initially the doctors at my compound were like, oh, it's just bursitis, fluid built up in the joint, no big deal. Here's an anti-inflammatory. But decided to send me to Bagram to the hospital to get checked out and maybe see a physical therapist and, I don't know, get insoles in my shoes or something. But so packed up my bags, and I was only supposed to be gone for a day, and flew over to Bagram to the hospital. And they had the same kind of assumption that it wasn't really anything too serious, but they had purchased an MRI for the country. It was the first time U.S. troops had access to an MRI in country. Before this, if you were in a condition that needed an MRI, you would get sent to Landstuhl, to the hospital in Germany. And at this point, I was not in any kind of condition that warranted a trip to Germany. But because I had this multi-million-dollar machine that they had just purchased, they decided, hey, while you're waiting for your rotator to take you back to Kabul, let's go ahead and take some images. If anything, it'll give us a baseline of this fluid that we think is just building up in your joint. And then if it gets worse, we'll have, a data set, just look back and see what it started with at this point. So I got an MRI and a trailer in Bagram, and they did the scans and found a 14 centimeter mass in my pelvis. And that was causing all the problems. When I had all the weight on my upper body, it was compressing the tumor and causing that weakness in my leg. So I immediately got medevaced. The doctor that saw me in Bagram, he had a colleague in San Antonio, Texas, which I was assigned to Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. But he called this doctor in San Antonio because he was a specialist in what he was guessing I might have. And at like 1:00 in the morning, Texas time, was like, hey, this is the patient I have. I think she might have bone cancer. Can I send her straight to you instead of Montana? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So called my husband next, said, hey, meet me in Texas. They found something. And I flew out there for treatment, chemotherapy, radiation. And then eventually the only chances that I really had for a long-term survival was, because it was a very aggressive form of cancer, was to amputate, to remove the tumor. And so I had to lose my left leg at the pelvis. So I'm what's called a external hemipelvectomy amputation, which is very, very rare. It's as high as you can go. And even with that amputation and even with the very aggressive chemo and radiation, my chances of surviving the next 5 years were only given to me as like 60%, which was not very good. But the interesting thing with the statistics and how my cancer diagnosis worked and my prognosis was that if you could get through those 5 years without any evidence of recurrence of the disease coming back, you're pretty much considered cured. Like, the chances of it returning are next to nothing. They really don't scan very much. If anything, my chances of a secondary cancer like leukemia, because of all the radiation I've received, those are now higher. So that's fun. But I'm 12 years out now, so we're sitting real good. We're feeling good about it. So
That's
it's a
awesome.
little bit about that part of my journey.
Yeah. Did you get to ring the bell? They usually have people do too.
I did. I did. When I finished my very last round of chemo, it was in the middle of the night, and so the type of chemo I had to go to the bone marrow transplant floor to receive it, and Adriamycin, it's called Red Death. they bring it in a UV protected bag, and the nurses that administer it wear like biohazard suits, and then they inject it directly into your body. So I wasn't on the chemo ward because I was receiving that kind of treatment and inpatient for a long time. So when they finally released me, it was middle of the night. But my nurse had keys and broke me into the chemo ward, and we just had our own little party, just me and my family and some of my really close friends, and rang the bell, and it was really special.
That's awesome. Well, and that's crazy that the military finally got stuff overseas at that point. But it kind of makes sense given the way they are. So
Yeah, I was very fortunate. If they had not had that machine, I just would have gone back. And with this type of cancer, it's very hard to diagnose because, like I said, there's not a lot of symptoms, and it's usually at stage 4 when it's progressed and metastasized within your body and become terminal is usually when people find it, unfortunately. So I was very fortunate. I fully believe that that deployment overseas of all things saved my life.
I would say so, especially kind of luck of the draw, and then having that machine out there. What was it like going through your head throughout this entire time before you even got to Texas?
I was heavily medicated.
That's fair.
um, yeah, and so I slept most of the way, and I got to Texas, and really, I mean, I knew there was a tumor in my hip. I knew that was what was happening. And I remember meeting the surgeon, the doctor that ended up saving my life for the first time, and hating him because he walked in the room and he kind of explained what he thought I had and how we would confirm it with biopsy. And that was very serious, and that he was going to try his hardest not to amputate my leg. And at this point, I was still walking fine. I had probably run a couple miles the day before. And I thought this guy was just out of his mind. I think I wanted to kick him out of my room, be like, no, I need someone new. You are off your rocker. Like, at most, I need a hip replacement because my leg is fine. Like, my foot's fine, my calf's fine, my knee's fine, my quad's fine. Like, why would you chop off my leg in its entirety when the problem is in my hip? In hindsight, I'm really grateful that he kind of placed, as mad as I was at him and everything, I'm glad he kind of already sowed that little seed in my mind. Because when it really came time, when we had to, the day before, make that last call decision to amputate or not, I was ready. I had been fully mentally, emotionally prepared, had understood what that meant, and was willing and ready to do it. Was not wanting to try limb salvage because I knew that it it would come back and kill me if I did that. So I'm in hindsight, I'm glad he kind of went ahead and maybe mentioned it.
Well, that's good. I mean, at least it prepared you for like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. And then, did you already have plans like, hey, I'm going to fight this, I'm going to beat this, and then I'm going to see what's next after this chapter? Or
Yeah, I mean, it was just a fight for survival. The I knew I wanted to be as aggressive as possible. I knew that I didn't want to not choose one of the options because it was too hard, and then just for like 5 years later for it to come back and wonder, like, well, if I had just done a little bit more, or if I had, like, with the chemotherapy, the first 3 rounds we did, and then we amputated, and then like at that point they had clear margins on the surgery. The second 3 rounds were kind of like bonus rounds. It was just to try to grab and kill any microscopic cancer cells that were undetectable in scans that were floating around my body. So not necessarily needed. But statistically, if you went and looked at case studies, it gave you the best chances because if there were any floating cells, that was the only way that you might maybe could kill them off. And so I knew, like, going into it, I was like, well, I'm going to do every single round if my body will allow it, because I don't want to regret not doing it. And I mean, it got pretty hard that last round. I mean, I'm very grateful for my husband because during the last round I was receiving blood transfusions. My body was really starting to struggle through it. And I remember halfway through being like, no, I'm done. Like, unplug it. I want to go home. I cannot stand one more minute of this therapy. I am calling it. And he knows me well enough to know that I would have regretted that later on. I totally would have. So he coached me through it. And we got through that next 48 hours, and here I am. So if it comes back now, I mean, I can, without a shadow of a doubt, be like, there was nothing else I could have done.
okay, that's great. You had someone in your corner to kind of like coach you through it. That's That's awesome. And then did you guys have kids at the same time, or were you guys just kind of first married and this happened?
We had just gotten married. We got married, and then 3 months later, I deployed. And then 4 months into my deployment is when I medevaced. So we hadn't even been married a year at that time. The doctors were like, "Hey, like you might not be able to have children because of all the things, right?
Yeah.
Like they're removing half my pelvis. The chemo, the radiation was to my pelvis. They're like, maybe there might be a chance of children in the future with a lot of medical intervention and support. But they did. We had some counseling and talked through that. We were just at that point. We're like, let's just survive this and see what happens.
So it's like one step at a time. And then, so now
Mm-hmm.
though, you are a mother, right? You have kids. So what's like the best thing about being a mom? Like the best thing about motherhood?
They're wild. They're two little boys. I love that they don't really see me as disabled yet. I think they know they're starting to pick up on like you're a little different, but they don't see it holding me back. I think they were very much surprised when I got pregnant with Tate, my older one, who's turning 8. I was still in my surveillance period that first 5 years, and it was scary, but not because I was about to become a parent with a disability, but only because parenting is hard and scary for anybody. But at that point in my journey, I'd already been exposed to a lot and had learned how to adapt and had accomplished some really cool things already. So I was very prepared and had already like developed the confidence just as a person to know that I could tackle hard things because I had done hard things already, and that this goal and the challenges I had, that I had the resources and the support system behind me, but also just the mentality of being creative and finding creative thinking outside the box solutions to meet my needs so that I could be the mom that I wanted to be and be independent and because I'm very type A personality who likes to be in control of things, and I don't like to rely on other people. And I'd done the work prior to having the kids to feel like I was very prepared to do that. And I'm very proud of that. Proud of the things that I've been able to do with the kids, um, and not really like have the disability hold me back in that regard.
Okay. So you mentioned that you did like some things before you had kids. What accomplishments did you have? And were these, or I would say, what are the first accomplishments you had after you got done with the cancer and the chemo and stuff like that? What was like the first big one?
Yeah. So another huge advantage of just like the way my journey played out was because I got medevac to San Antonio to Brooke Army Medical Center. They also have the Center for the Intrepid located there, which, if you're familiar with like Walter Reed, it's very similar to that. It's where a lot of the military members go for physical therapy after being injured overseas.
Okay.
They also have a very large burn unit there. And I was very fortunate, like 99% of the patients at the Center for the Intrepid were all combat injured. But they were willing and able to open up a spot for me to do my rehab there too. And so that was very pivotal in just my success and my rehabilitation prior to finishing up chemo. I mean, I think I was still under chemo treatment when the CFI started me in therapy under them. So under one roof, it was physical therapy, occupational therapy, prosthetics, and then recreational therapy. And it was very eye opening. And I think it was very great for my personality because it was just full of these soldiers and these Marines that some of them were only 20, very young in their prime, best shapes of their life, that had gotten blown up overseas. And now we're trying to get back to some semblance of normal and get very independent. And a lot of the guys that were like, say, just a single leg below the knee, who we very affectionately called paper cuts, very lovingly, a lot of them wanted to get in their prosthetics and capable enough to remain on active duty, return overseas, and return to the fight. And so to walk into a community where that's happening, it's hard not to just feel very motivated to like get over yourself and just put in the work and see what you're able to do, and to see these guys like sweating, and like it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, like we had our hard times, but to have like that community where you could lean on each other through those hard times, but also encourage each other and really celebrate each other's successes, and challenge each other to go a little harder. Like one of the guys that was in my time slot for physical therapy really wanted to get back to skateboarding, but he was missing both of his legs above the knee. And so he brought his skateboard in, and they tried all these different variations. And Ian was like, Sarah, get on this thing. Like, okay, sure. So just being surrounded by that really, really helped me. But like I said, they had the OTPT, but then rec therapy, I didn't even know what that was. And I remember my very first consultation with Heather, who was a recreational therapist on the fourth floor. I went to my appointment that was scheduled for me. It was a military order because I was still active duty. So I went and saw her. I crutched in, sat down behind her desk. She's like, "Oh, Sarah, nice to meet you. Hey, we're taking a group of patients out to California to go surfing. You want to go?" I remember thinking, like, who hired this lady? Like, did you not just see me walk in here? Like, I have one leg. Like, I tried to get into the pool the other day, and I can't even doggy paddle, and I go in a circle because I have one leg. And you want to take me out to California and throw me in the ocean where there's waves, and like I'm gonna drown and die. I just survived. I just survived everything I just survived, and you're gonna go drown me in California? Like, you're nuts. And so I was very much like, no, I don't. I never liked surfing before anyway. Like, why would I do that now? And she was like, we go every year. We take all sorts of patients. She listed off some of the guys that were going to go. Like, one of the guys was missing both legs and an arm, and he was going to go surfing. And she knew that I really liked traveling. I've always loved traveling. She's like, if anything out of this experience, like, let's help you navigate TSA. Like, as a group with therapists on board, with physical therapists, rec therapists, occupational therapists, with other patients, all in a gaggle, going through security, figuring out baggage claim, how to like navigate the airport just as a group with support to just kind of learn what works for you. And that's what sold me. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go. Let's try it. And we went, and I did get on a surfboard, and they had some very like class act instructors, some of the best in the world, that paddled out with us on day 4. They towed us through the waves on jet skis, and I've never been so terrified. But I still don't. Surfing's still not my absolute favorite. I don't like the salt water up my sinuses personally. But it was that was probably the first moment that like really just was eye opening to like, hey, all these preconceived notions about like what your life is going to look like and your activity level and your abilities, like throw those out the window because you just went to California and surfed. It was the first time I had a beer on crutches because the Brits were there. They invited the injured British troops, and they like to drink. So really just learning how to navigate life and seeing other people also just live it to the fullest and get passionate about a sport, and think it through. And after that, I kept saying yes to all the opportunities, as crazy as they sounded, that came across like, hey, do you want to try this? Do you want to try that? And and so I got very involved in like the rec therapy scene and adaptive sports. And like I said, I said pretty much yes to all the opportunities. And if anything, it was a break from the therapist and the hospital setting and those things to just get out and do something different. So a few weeks after my amputation, I went and I hand biked, and I only went a mile, but I got my heart rate up, worked up a little bit of a sweat, and like, you know what? There are options here, and I want to find all of them.
Oh, so it sounds like you just kind of so you kept the surfing, figured out how to travel, with like through the airport and stuff like that, given your adaptation. And then so being introduced to surfing, you started saying yes to a lot of opportunities. So that kind of just seems like it's instilled you like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. And then somehow you got into, was it soccer, or did you get into other things first and soccer came later?
Yeah, I got into some other things first. So within the military community, with adaptive sports, there's a very friendly competition. It's called the Warrior Games, where the branches compete against each other in Paralympic style events. And so it's cycling, swimming, track and field. And it's been going on for 14, 15 years now. And the Air Force team recruited me and said, hey, you should come try this out and be on Team Air Force. We'd like to have you out to a camp. And this is still very early on. And I was like, yes, absolutely, let's go. And they had me fill out like the little sheet telling them about myself. And on the form, I think they asked what sports I was interested in. I was like, well, I don't know what shot put is, so I'm not going to sign up for that. I've been hand cycling. I've learned that very quickly, so I'm going to sign up for hand cycling. Air rifle. I had actually shot air rifle in college before I lost my leg. So I was like, I know how to do that. Swimming, I survived surfing, so I'll try swimming in a lane going straight. And then I kind of just like left it alone after that. And we got there. We had our first meeting with the coaches, and we got our schedules. And I was signed up for dang near everything: track, field, shot put, discus, shooting, cycling, swimming, uh, all the things. And I remember approaching the coaches and like, I think someone made a mistake here. Like, no, no, no. We think you could be a really good all around athlete. You've kind of proved you're athletic. Let's go and try it. And so I did. I tried the track chair, which is a push rim wheelchair. I threw discus and shot put, and some of the things, I like tried them. Didn't gravitate towards them or love them, and feel passionate about them, but was willing to try. And I really kind of honed in on cycling and swimming and felt very competitive in those um, sports, and focused my time and effort in training for cycling and swimming, and did pretty well. Got a couple medals at the Warrior Games in 2014. And then Prince Harry at that time had been, because we had been inviting the British troops to come over and compete in the Warrior Games, more as like an intro for them. Like they did some exhibition seated volleyball and wheelchair basketball events just to kind of participate and get a feel for it. And at that time, Prince Harry had come over and seen it and said, hey, we need to make this bigger. We need to make this worldwide. And so his brainchild was the Invictus Games. And so I tried out for, at that point, it would be Team USA. So all the branches coming together to form one team to go over to London for the inaugural Invictus Games against all the other countries, and focused my time on cycling and swimming. And so in 2014, I got to go over to London and compete in the London Olympic Arena. And I was able to secure a gold medal in handcycling.
That's awesome. I would love to hear about the Invictus Games, just because I've seen that stuff before and I really like what he does, and especially Prince Henry. And then, what's her name? She's a climber who was in the Marine Corps that lost her leg, did a hike and met him
Christianas?
too. Yes, Christine Ennis. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear about your experience over there and how it was and everything.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Really liked it. I went on and climbed Kilimanjaro with a group of wounded and injured veterans. So tallest mountain in Africa at 19,341 feet. Did it on crutches. It was very much a huge challenge. Great group of people that I'm very, very close to still to this day. But for at that time with sports, like I kind of started, like I loved competing, and competing at that level was super cool. And a lot of like my colleagues really took the opportunity to lean full into that, and had Paralympic aspirations. They wanted to be professional athletes and do that. And I admire them so much and have so much respect for them. For me, especially during that time, it wasn't something that I was super interested in. I viewed myself more as a recreational athlete, somebody that wanted to do these other things, like go hike and climb mountains, and still very challenging things. But I saw what my friends were doing and devoting their entire lives to a sport, and like moving to an area with an Olympic training center and training, and just the dedication that it took and the passion behind it. And I've loved following their journeys. But for me, I think I felt drawn to go back to work for a little while, because I felt like I was doing really well in my career, was thriving there and really proving myself. And then to kind of have it forcefully taken away from me via medical retirement from the military, I was like, you know what? I think I want to go back, and pursue my career and still be athletic and still, be a part of the community, but in my own way. So I ended up becoming a federal employee. I actually did for the Air Force as a civilian the exact job I was doing before. The day I separated from the military, I was in my uniform. The next day I showed back up to work in civilian clothing, same cubicle, same accounts, same boss, and just resumed. And then when we moved to Washington, D.C., I took a position with the Department of Homeland Security and was a budget analyst for them at their headquarters. And so got to spend a lot of time with the President's Office of Management and Budget, and up on Congress with the House and the Senate, and felt like I was still doing what I'd always wanted to do, and serve my country in my own capacity, and do like congressional justifications for budget requests for the government. And I enjoyed that a lot. And then I got pregnant, started having kids. And at that point, my husband was also in a transition out of active duty, and we were going to move again. And I was like, you know what, I wanted to spend this time at home with these kids that I didn't think I was going to be able to have, and focus my time on family and being supportive of my husband, who, I mean, as you can tell, was very supportive of me when I was going through it. And so for a long time, I really felt like I had retired basically from competitive sports 10 years ago in 2014 when I stopped competing. I did still CrossFit because I love adaptive CrossFit and the adaptive CrossFit world, and have really enjoyed it. And a couple years ago, I mean, the kids are getting a little older, so I was focusing more on myself and giving myself some more time. And a buddy of mine, John Oder Heath, who's big in the adaptive CrossFit world, and our paths crossed with military, with Movie United Warfighters program. He was like, "Hey, you should do the Open, CrossFit Open." Excuse me. I was like, "Sure." I've never done it, but I have the time, and I'd like to challenge myself and see if I could do that. And so I was doing that, and because of COVID, you had to like video yourself and submit it virtually. And so I was posting a lot more on Instagram and sharing my story there, and trying to see if I would qualify for, the adaptive divisions. And that's how soccer found me and invited me out, and here I am.
So, did you find CrossFit before soccer or kind of simultaneously?
So I started doing the soccer thing back in 2014, around the same time I was doing the Invictus Games and Warrior Games and all that. In San Antonio at CFI, when I was kind of finishing up and graduating from physical therapy, I wasn't sure where to go next. Like, I had gone on these trips with the program, introduced to a few sports, was still invited to come out with the cycling group and stuff like that. And I was thinking about going back to work, and I was like, well, what do I do for physical fitness? And a lot of the guys that were in CFI with me had gone on and gone to Alamo CrossFit. And that CrossFit gym, they've been closed for quite a while now, but their owners had made an agreement that if you were a wounded or injured veteran, you could come out and work out for free. I was like, well, I'll go try it. Sure. Like, I'm not going to turn down free. And my good buddy, Jen Lee, he's a 4-time gold medalist with sled hockey. He's the sled hockey goaltender. And he was one of the very first amputees I ever met. The morning after I woke up, he walked into my hospital room and sat down. And like, I didn't even notice that he was missing his leg. He walked so well. I didn't look down. I didn't see the
Oh,
above
wow.
knee prosthetic he was wearing. I was like, who are you? Are you in the wrong room? I don't know you. But one of my nurses was his neighbor, and she had been like, hey, there's this girl. She's losing her leg. Could you come and just talk to her about what's next? And so he just came in, sat down, and I have this video of us where he walked me over to the window, pointed out the window of the CFI, and he's like, yeah, this is where you're going to go for therapy. And he's still a very dear friend of mine. He's about to become a dad. I'm very excited for him. But he really mentored me through the process. He had lost his leg years before this, and he was on the sled hockey team and professional athlete, and he was going and CrossFitting at this gym. He's like, you should come with me, try it out. So I went and I did the first workout with a trainer for the fundamentals with a PVC pipe, not even any weight. And like halfway through, I went and hid in the bathroom because I thought I was going to throw up. It was very hard. But I kept going, and the community was very inviting. And I loved how varied it was, because with cycling and swimming, I really realized that it takes so much dedication, because it's a lot of the same, right? Like, there's drills that you do to spice it up, but I got very bored in the pool after 1,000 meters. I got very like, just the cycling I would have to really talk myself into, because it's like another 30 miles, another 60 miles. Like, uh, you know, it's a lot of the same. And I mean, it's still very enjoyable and I like it. And I can see why some people really, their personalities tend to those kinds of sports. But I liked with CrossFit, it was something different all the time, but also kind of the same. Like, you would start to learn some of the skills and get better at them, get stronger at them. And then it would change. And then you'd revisit those, and all of a sudden you were lifting more, or it just felt better or cleaner. I also really, really appreciated that it was functional fitness, and that every movement I did in the gym directly translated into my day-to-day life. Lifting up heavy things, like I could squat down and get that heavy mixer that's on the bottom shelf in my kitchen for when I want to make cupcakes. Kettlebell carries. I can carry in all my groceries in one trip because I'm stubborn like that and I don't want to make multiple trips. Box step ups, box jumps. If the elevator is broken, I can walk up the stairs, whatever. Um, like the cardio part of it, just endurance, just mobility in general. Everything I saw in the gym just helps me live my normal day to day life that much better. If I can deadlift 100 pounds, my kid wants me to pick them up, I can pick them up. So that's what has always kept me coming back to CrossFit. And that when I do travel, you can usually drop into a gym. You can pay a little fee and be like, hey, I'm going to stop by. I usually give them a little heads up, like, hey, I know I'm missing a leg. It's fine. Like I do adapt to CrossFit. I'm very open to coaching. You see something that you think I can be doing better or have an idea for me, yeah, but like don't stress about it. Like I know my way around at this point after 10 years. I'm pretty comfortable looking at the board, seeing what the workout is, and being like, these are the changes that I need to make to suit my workout needs. But so I've been doing CrossFit pretty steadily on and off for the entire. It's been my one constant probably over the past 12 years.
Okay, and that's good that you're open to coaching. A lot of people would be like, "Nah, I got it," and especially since you have that Type A personality. I'm like, but that's good though. And then, okay, I can see how CrossFit's good for you. And so, being that consistent, you think that kind of helps you um, stay, I guess, ready for soccer and World Cups and stuff like that.
The training's a lot different for soccer. I was doing the competitive CrossFit stuff and trying to get into the open. I qualified for Barcelona in Barcelona, Spain. I qualified for an event that was happening in the Oceania Thread in Australia. But I realized that with the style of soccer and the physical requirements on my body, I've had to. I still do that as like a general maintenance type exercise, but I'm having to spend more time on the field, more running, more sprint type stuff, and definitely the ball touches. I have to focus more on touching a ball and drills of that nature, and so I'm having to prioritize a very very different style of workout over what I'm used to, which is challenging for me because I like routine and I like what I like. But it's important for me to prioritize soccer and the different formats that I need to follow for that.
Could you kind of dive into like what you guys do training wise, like as far as like drills? Because I know soccer has a lot of drills like any other sport. So I'd love to hear how you guys do it, especially being an adaptive team.
Yeah, so soccer was I mean, it was out of left field for me when the captain of the men's team, Nico, reached out and was like, "Hey, we're forming a women's team. Are you interested in coming out and trying it?" And like my response was like, "No, actually, I only because I had seen the men play and I've watched them ever since I lost my leg. I because the forearm crushes I use are the forearm crushes that soccer player use because they're high performance carbon fiber, designed to go very far. They're the ones I climbed Kilimanjaro on. They're designed for high impact and for high activity levels and designed for life. They're the best out there. And so I'd been watching them for years and years, and I remember like watching the national team and seeing them run and sprint and like do flips and like all these crazy things. I mean, like like I don't know that I'm ever gonna want to do that. Um, but I was drawn to it because I was like, I have wanted to figure out how to go faster. Like kind of on one speed. There's like a double hop skip that you can do to go a little bit faster. And then there's like an alternating where you take your crutches and alternate the run. And these guys they're going really fast. And I've tried to like break apart the mechanics on my own at home. And every time I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm gonna fall and I'm gonna bust my teeth out of my face because I don't understand. Like, are they leaning forward? Is it more leg? Is it more arm? Is it a bigger stride? Like I can't. I'm watching these videos and I don't get it. And like my husband isn't gonna be able to tell me by looking at me. It's only this team and these athletes are the ones that are gonna be like, oh no, you just have to, I don't know, turn your wrists over. And so I was motivated to go and like just meet them and be like, well, I've been on crutches for over 10 years. Maybe I might learn something new. And I have had this mantra of just saying yes to freaking every opportunity that comes my way, unless there's an absolute reason to say no. And I don't have some glaring reason why I can't. So I was like, oh, sure, I'll come try it out. Fully expecting to go out to that first camp. You're like, yeah, I tried soccer, not for me. Just like, shot put and discus, just like a couple of other things I've tried where I'm like, okay, cool. I can say I did it. We're done here. But I absolutely fell in love with the sport, obviously, because I'm still here. Fell in love with the community. Really did learn some new skills on the crutches, and a lot more. I thought I was confident on crutches before. I have a lot more crutch confidence now on them, have picked up some speed, have learned so many things. And then also just fallen in love with the sport itself because soccer was not something I grew up doing or watching. And I can see why they call it the beautiful game. And I can see just how beautiful it is and how it's such a universal language and played everywhere. And I wish I had done it as a kid. I want to get my kids into soccer. I'm just full in now, big time fan. But the drills and stuff, there's it's a lot of ball skills. Right now in Florida, I'm the only player on the team that's in Florida. We've got some girls. I mean, we're all over. There's girls up in New York, California, Columbus, Ohio. We've got a bunch in Texas. So geographically, we're very spread out. And unfortunately, finances and schedules and stuff like that, we get to meet like right now, probably once every other month if we're lucky, to train together and scrimmage together. So I spent a lot of time with that soccer ball against a wall, just doing touches, one touch, two touch, inside foot, outside foot, laces, and moving. I sneak out to the local ball field and set up some cones, and I'll do some dribbling and running with the ball and pacing, and then of course taking shots and trying to get some power behind my kick and stuff like that. I really wish I had more people to train with, and I do drag my friends out there, my able-bodied friends. Drag out on occasion and be like, yeah, you're gonna kick a ball around with me. The kids are good to train with because they're very unpredictable. That's actually
Oh
good training.
yeah.
You do terrible passes, and that's good. So it's a lot of that speed and endurance. We do 20 or sometimes 25-minute matches, or halves, usually 20 minutes. And so just keeping that very high heart rate, sprinting capability, movement capability for a sustained period of time, which is different from what I've done in CrossFit. Trying to build that up. And it's interesting because for, as involved as I have been in adaptive sports and how athletic I have maintained, my athletic abilities have maintained over the past decade, this is the first time I've had to push my body to like run, right? Like that cardiovascular, high intensity, sustained bit. I haven't done that to my body in over 10 years. And so there's a little bit of a catch up there, like trying to recondition to be able to maintain that kind of fitness level. And I'm getting older. I'm getting older. And so it's been a challenge, but one I'm enjoying and I'm seeing results from it. But there's moments where I'm like, I have not felt this way or pushed this way in a very, very long time. And it's kind of surprising to me because I wouldn't have guessed that.
Does it feel good though to push yourself like that?
It does. It feels great. And it feels great now that like I have kind of been able to condition myself to where now when we do meet and we scrimmage, I'm not, and if my coaches are listening to this, I probably should admit this, but in the beginning camps, there would be like, how many more minutes do we have to play? Like, when are we done? What time is it? Like, I don't know that I can go another 20 minutes doing this or another 5 minutes doing this. And I always did push through. But like now, when we go and we scrimmage and we go all out and we push ourselves at the end, I'm not done. I'm like, no, I want to play some more. And that is such a good feeling to be like, all right, like I'm not completely gassed. Like
Yeah.
I'm working and I'm pushing my body to its absolute limits, but I have more in the tank. And that's really cool.
So you can see the difference now. You're like, okay, I'm getting this, I'm getting the conditioning I need, stuff like that. And then since you guys are like separated, but you had said someone's in New York, California. Do you guys have like a coach or a person that gives you guys like strength conditioning information to practice and stuff?
We have a fantastic staff. So the American Amputee Soccer Association, who has the governing authority for us to compete internationally under the World Amputee Football Federation. Sorry, that was each long.
That's all right.
They're all volunteer. It's a nonprofit organization, and so they do this out of the kindness of their hearts because they're passionate about it. And we have some of like the best coaches. Like I look at them and I see the training they're giving us, and I'm like, people pay big bucks to receive this kind of training for this sport. But we have three coaches. Paige Palazzolo is our head coach, and she's also a futsal player. She's also the goalkeeper coach for the men's team too. Just very knowledgeable people. Emily, she's a physical therapist by trade, so that's great to have in our back pocket too, because she understands body mechanics and injury and how to keep us safe, but played ball very competitively growing up and is an incredible coach. Nacho is one of our coaches, and he was on the men's team and has graciously just poured into the women's team because he believes in us. And so he's an amputee player, so he has that experience. And then, we just have a whole staff behind us that just pour into us and support us. And the list is very long, of the people that make this organization happen and just care for us and contribute to it.
That's great. You guys have, yeah, that is awesome that you guys have a physical therapist that's in there. That helps a lot, and especially since everybody played it. So I had a question and I just totally lost it. It happens all the time. Oh man.
We do a lot of group messaging. We have multiple group chats, one that's players only, one that's the World Cup roster, and then the players. And every camp we have a different camp chat, and so we all hold each other accountable and encourage each other. We have one that's strictly just about fitness, that we share our workouts on and what we're doing, to try to motivate each other to keep up. And so there's a lot of sharing. We also share a lot about the different grants that are available, because the equipment is expensive. The crutches that we use, they can be up to $1,000 a pair, plus the cleats and field space and stuff like that. So we're very grateful that there's a lot of nonprofit organizations out there that provide grants and scholarships to try to bridge that gap to help us do what we're doing.
Is there a way some people can get involved, whether it's through volunteer or like providing funding or anything like that?
Yeah, so we have a big fundraising campaign going on right now for the World Cup, because it's going to be expensive to get all of our players and then the staff over there. Plus, we have the training camps coming up to train for it, and then lodging while we're there and airfare. Like I said, it's the American Amputee Soccer Association, and we're on social media under the same name, AASA. The women's team has their own women's handle. And then we have the fundraising campaign where we're actively fundraising and trying to find sponsorships from organizations. But then, field space, we're always looking for field space all over the US. We have some amazing organizations up in New Jersey that discount fields. And so a lot of times we travel there because we can afford it. And just different sponsorships too. Like field space is very expensive, but then coaching too. We have a social media manager that works for us, that markets for us. We're always looking for people to help us with just business type stuff too, fundraising, leading a fundraising campaign in general. It's like running a business. So there's so many ways to give back and support the organization. We have one staff member, Adriana, who is launching and developing the youth program, which I'm very excited about. And so she's hosting youth clinics in various places to bring the kids out, to introduce them to amputee soccer and give them the adaptation, and to kind of introduce the sport to them at that level. And then we also have just regional, we're starting to see a lot more regional teams develop. We have one that launched in Colorado Springs. I think the Rapids who's they're associated with. We've got one in Chicago. There's one in California that just launched. We have a couple established teams in New England and New York. So it's the sport itself is growing very quickly, which is fantastic. But the organization and just the players, we could definitely use support too to help it, grow in that direction and facilitate. Because it's one of those sports that just really gives a lot to people. So.
Yeah, definitely. We'll make sure we get some information from you so we can make some posts and stuff. Since I got all these reels going out now. Yeah, definitely. So I have to try to get involved too later in life. So, because that's my goal, is physical therapy and adaptive athletes somewhere along the lines. So that's awesome. Okay. Speaking of athletics and stuff, you guys take this very seriously, like any other athlete. Can you kind of speak on, I know we talked about your training, but what about nutrition? Are you really good about nutrition, about your rest, things like a normal professional athlete would go and do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are going and representing our country, and that is just like such an honor. Like, so we want to be in our best tip top performance shape. And we did get to, when we first developed the women's team, there was Poland had already had a women's team. They had been they had formed a couple years ago and had been meeting, and so they invited us out to do a friendly match against them. There was already an amputee soccer tournament happening in Poland with 5 countries. So Poland, let's see, the UK, Costa Rica, Japan, and then us, USA. And so the men's team at that time, before this, amputee soccer has always been mixed gendered. But since we had our women's team, the women's team got to compete against the Polish women's team at the very end of the tournament. And so we were very small at that time. We only had one sub on the bench. But getting out there and placing our hands over our hearts and singing the national anthem, I think really just was that moment where, I mean, we already were taking it very serious, but knowing that you are representing your country, especially for me as a military member, like getting to put on a uniform and go do that, it's very serious. Like I'm not playing around here. And so, yeah. And now that it's grown, and I mean, we had tryouts to make the roster. It's getting competitive.
That's great.
You got to fight for your spot, and we have a full roster that we're taking to Columbia, and now everyone's like, "Well, I want to start. I want to be a starter." Um, and you gotta fight for it, and you gotta work, and you gotta prove to the coaches that you are coachable, and that you are growing, and that you're an all around athlete, and that you can present yourself professionally in a professional manner, to represent the organization and to represent our country and represent the sport. So I think it's something that we should all, and I do believe that all the women take to heart, and want to do that.
Yeah. Is there a kind of a legacy you want to leave, or
Yeah,
impression you want to make?
it's a little bit bittersweet for me. Like I said, I thought I retired from high level competitive sports a long time ago, but this opportunity came along, and I absolutely want to be part of history. I want to be one of the leading groups that like goes out there and lays down the foundation, does some of the hard work, and goes through some of the growing pains, because there are, like, it's developing and we're learning and figuring it out as we go. I hope that eventually I go to tryouts and I'm edged out, like, because it's just grown and the athletes are that good, and we are finding some younger women out there, and we are. I mean, some of our players are 19 or 20, and they're fantastic. And if I don't make the team because the team is better than me, I am all for whatever makes it what is best for the team. And it'll be hard to step away, but I will gladly hand over the reins and be the biggest fan in the stadium. And I have aspirations of being the older lady that cheers in the stands and being like, I helped them get there. I would love to see these kids that are growing up in the youth program right now get to go to a World Cup on their own, or maybe even the Paralympics if amputee soccer eventually gets pulled into the Paralympic arena, and go cheer them on, and hopefully have them, be fully funded, maybe even paid, to get to go do that, and not have to stress about some of the things that we've had to stress about, and work towards, just because we've laid that foundation. I will be so proud, if we're able to pull that off, and I think we will. At the rate it's growing and the support we're receiving, I see the future as being fantastic for the next generation, and I'm glad to be a part of it right now.
Okay, yeah, it seems like you're telling us a growth. Now there's 5 countries that have a team, and USA is part of them. So that's a good sign.
So we have 12 now.
Oh, 12 now. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Probably even more than that, but 12 that are that applied and will be at the World Amputee Football Federation World Cup. So, but I think there's probably more than that are in existence, and it's pretty cool to find them on social media and watch them and try to see what kind of game they play, and yeah.
Yeah, watch the Instagram film, or what is it? Film tapes or whatever, film days when you have to play
Yeah.
football. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, Could you tell us more about the youth? Because to me, that seems really fantastic and a great thing that we're starting to get into, like the youth athletics. I'd love to hear more about that.
It's awesome. So I actually, when England launched their women's team, I traveled over. I wanted to see some friends, and then also just show our support to they're called the Lionesses, and so I got to go meet their very first forming women at their first kickoff event, and they've also grown rapidly in our training. But while I was over there, I realized that the like European network, and I mean soccer is big over there, right? But England in particular already has and has had a very robust youth program with regional teams, and a lot of like their national team members grew up in the youth development camps. And in America, like it's not that much. Like there's not as many opportunities for the kids, and I've only gotten to participate in some kids clinics here and there. When we had the U.S. Cup in Ohio, where we had regional teams compete against, we had a small little kids clinic right in the middle to just kind of introduce it to some kids, and it's really cool. It's interesting though because like prosthetics are so good, and amputee soccer is played on crutches. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's 7v7. Everyone, all the field players are a lower extremity disability, and everyone uses forearm crutches on the field. The goaltenders are always someone with an upper limb extremity and are limited use of one hand. Since they can't have two legs, they are not allowed to leave the goal box. And then the pitch is a little bit smaller, no offsides, but beyond that, it's soccer. It's still very much fundamentally soccer. Um, but it's interesting because everyone has to take the prosthetics off, and very few players are full time crutch users. Because why would you use crutches if you are a very proficient prosthetic user? Because I'm missing my leg at the pelvis. Prosthetics are very complicated for me. I'm missing all three load bearing joints. I'm missing my hip and half my pelvis. So I have a prosthetic. I walk fine in it, but it's very limiting, and I'm just much more capable on the crutches. But for a lot of people, they don't go on their crutches until they reach the pitch, and then they take their leg off, and then they go on crutches. So there's sometimes an advantage to being a full time crutch user in soccer. But we're seeing a lot with the youth. It's a lot of these kids are in great working prosthetics full time, and that's great. Like that's fantastic that the technology is out there and gives them their lives and makes them very capable. And a lot of times with the littlest kids, they're able to keep up with their peers in their prosthetics when playing soccer, and so they don't want to take that leg off and try to learn a new discipline and get the crutches that might slow them down because they're kids and like the leg works and they can run just as fast as their friends. But what we're seeing, or at least what I'm seeing, and this is just my personal opinion, is eventually in their teen years, they might not be able to keep up anymore using their prosthetic, especially if they're an above the knee amputee. There's just limiting factors there on your capabilities and your speed and your mobility and your maneuverability on the field. I mean, some can, I'm not saying all of them, but there's a little bit of a disadvantage there. Even, and maybe not later, maybe the prosthetics will get so great that there's never a disadvantage. But in my opinion, right now, once they reach a certain age, they get slowed down by it. And so the forearm crutches, I feel like if you're introduced kind of early on to just having that option, not one that you always have to use, but it's just a tool in your wheelhouse and something that you can develop. It's only going to prepare you if it's something that you want to pursue later. Nico, I mentioned him earlier, he is congenital amputee, so he's always been on forearm crutches. He played able-bodied soccer on forearm crutches because he was just that good, but he's always been on forearm crutches since birth. So I think there's advantages of starting early and just introducing and breaking some of that stigma of using the crutches. So I think as we hopefully as we develop some of these youth camps and just invite kids out and maybe let them meet some of the players that play at this very high level that can do some really cool things on crutches and move very, very fast, might inspire them to give it a shot. Just know that it's an opportunity or just even a possibility. It's outside of typical convention. It looks a little bit different, but it's just a possibility.
How often are you guys able to work with like the youth athletes and stuff?
I personally, I mean, I wish I could see them all the time. Right now, a lot of the youth programs are up in the Northeast. I live in Florida. And with just the time commitments of the kids and everything else, and just focusing on World Cup this year, I haven't gotten to participate as much as I'd like. But I think in the future, if I eventually do step back from kind of competing on the national team level, I would love to get more involved in these youth programs. And I would love to maybe devote some effort and time into developing one in my region, down here in Florida, and finding different adaptive sporting communities that might be able to facilitate that. I'm still pretty active just in the adaptive sports world in general as an ambassador for different sports. I went and competed in a swimming competition recently just to act as a mentor to some other individuals. So I'm always actively trying to find different adaptive sports organizations that don't have amputee soccer as part of their um, offerings at that time, and be like, hey, have you ever considered it? This is something you might be able to work in. So I see a potential for in the future doing more advocacy for it, and hopefully finding some space for me to get more involved in helping out with the youth programs, because I feel pretty passionate about it. And those kids are just so fun.
Yeah, well, they got a unique perspective given like their life circumstances, that they've been handed,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But that's great that they are trying to get it out there, and then just kind of introducing them to a bigger community. I think is probably really a good aspect, and that'd be something I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on, as the adaptive community, as one, as for adaptive soccer, but then adaptive overall community.
It's the best community. I mean, it's the one community you don't ever wish to join, and you don't wish to grow. You don't hope that people will start joining it because of what that means. But once you're within the community, it's the best part. Like, it's one of the best communities to be a part of. Like-minded individuals, ones that really just know how to push yourselves and encourage each other, but also know that like sometimes life is shit. But I kind of mourn a little bit whenever I leave an event, especially soccer, because like when you're around another group of amputees or people that are very similar to you and have learned how to navigate life, you treat each other differently. And like if I drop a crutch, no one's going to come running to me. They're just going to expect me to squat down and pick it up because I'm capable of doing that. If I'm home and I drop a crutch at Walmart, people like fawn over and like, like, oh, let me help you. And that's great. Like, I shouldn't complain about that because people are kind and they mean the best, but you're coddled a little bit. People see you out and about and they kind of just jump to conclusions and make assumptions about you. Like, I was at Costco the other day, and a very lovely little old lady came up and asked me if I needed help getting something from the top shelf. And I was like, lady, I can bench press you. Like, but it is just truly kindness. And so
Yeah,
I feel almost guilt, and I've had to work very hard at just seeing the kindness and just being very polite and like, no, or just accepting the help because people just want to help and it makes them feel good, and I can accept help and that's fine. But to be in an environment where you're scrimmaging and you get knocked on your ass, and it's almost like celebrated by how quickly you can get back up or how you dust yourself off or how you react to it, is really just refreshing and good for the soul in a lot of ways. To be told by a coach, like, hey, go run half a mile, we're going to time you and we expect you to go fast, is people don't tell me to do that or don't expect that of me because they've made assumptions. When practice is over, the coaches don't pick up our crap for us. They don't go and pick up the cones. I'm like, oh, I got it. No, they expect us to do it. And they expect us to pick up our water bottles because we're capable, and they know that and they see that and they expect that of us. And then to go home, people will be rushing to hold the door open. I'm like, I can hold my door open. It's just, it's cool to be part of that community, and it's always just refreshing to be around those people, and just like the group chats too afterwards and how we support each other. Um, in the little things, and in the big moments too that are completely separate from sports. One of my dear friends and teammates on the team is pregnant now, and it's just to be able to share that with her and reflect on when I found out I was pregnant and those beginning stages of motherhood, and to get to see her going through that and to try to be a resource to her share my experiences and just encourage her is so special. Like I have had plenty of friends that have had pregnancies and have become mothers, and we support each other, and it's a beautiful time. But to have someone that like whose story is so very similar to my own, and to be able to have her and talk to her and just be reminded of everything I've accomplished in that part of my life, is very. I don't take it for granted. I hold it very valuable in my heart to just have that community and have people that went before that are more experienced, that are mentors to me that I can rely on, and then just also try to be a resource to some of the people that are facing similar diagnoses that I had, or just similar hardships, and try to be a resource to them is it's empowering, and it feels like I'm contributing just to humanity. And those are also, I mean, those are things I didn't have before having to go through what I've gone through, and um, I went and traded. I mean, I'm grateful for it.
Would you say there's kind of a big difference with spending time in like an adaptive community, just you guys together, because you have like a better understanding of kind of what you're going through, what you might be dealing with, compared to people on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I think so. The sense of humor is a little bit dark sometimes,
Ooh, do
um,
tell.
but just some of the jokes are completely inappropriate. But we can poke fun at each other in a way that other people may not be comfortable joking about, and yeah, it's just yeah, I've got a great support system and a great community of people that rally behind me and support me and get to know me and know what I'm capable of and cheer me on. But to have people that have just like walked the walk and have gone through it too, um, is really cool.
Yeah.
And with the soccer team, it's interesting. Something I've realized is like I thought like I had been pretty well versed in the adaptive sports community because I've been around it for so long. But this is the first time I've been on like a primarily woman environment and community, versus like most of the events I've been in have been more veteran based. And so it's so cool to me to be a part of this group of women who arguably were very alike, because obviously we all want to compete at a very high level. We're very competitive. We're athletes. We're all women. We're all women with disabilities. Beyond that, though, we are so different. And that is so fascinating to me because I would have never met these women otherwise. And they come from all different backgrounds. Some of them are congenital amputees who have all been disabled their entire lives, who have had a completely different journey than me. Q from Ohio she's a welder, like just different people from different walks of life. I would have never I would have never crossed paths. Like we would have never met or known each other, and I learned so much from them. And like I said, I wouldn't have ever met them, and I'm so glad that I've been able to, because I've learned so much from them. And it's neat to see just how alike we can be, but also just so different.
Do you feel like this soccer has kind of given you freedom to like express yourself and be authentic as well? Kind of like brought it out of you, or
Yeah, I think adaptive sports in general has done that. I mean, I've always been who I am, but being able to find opportunities to thrive and to build confidence and to have like basically bragging rights, to just have something to be very very proud of, and just have a long list of accomplishments to look back on and share with people, and be, it's empowering, and it helps me to, helps me on those days where like you get a little complacent. And it's ironic because I remember in the midst of being sick and miserable and like not really knowing what the future was, one of my little mantras that I would tell myself was, one day you're going to wake up and your biggest stress in life is that you're out of eggs, or you need to get gas, or just like the stupid mundane day-to-day life things, because cancer and things are going to be in the past, and you've gotten so good at adapting and just moving forward with your life that those things are no longer going to be your big stressors. Your big stressors are going to be the silly things. In a lot of ways, that's true. Um, I did not expect it to just like, sometimes I get bogged down in it and just the day to day, like, got to get the kids to school, got to get groceries, got to do the laundry, like all these things are so stressful. And like soccer and having this huge goal and like almost always having some kind of goal on the horizon to work towards, that's pretty massive. Um, Always reminds me of what I've been through and what I've accomplished, and that when life gets really hard, and that I might get, frustrated or stressed over it, it kind of grounds me in a way where I can look around and be like, look at what I'm doing right now. Like, I'm a part of this team that's going to go like history on the international stage playing a sport I never dreamed I would get to play. And I'm going to complain about the amount of laundry that I got to go do. Like, it's humbling, and good. And I wish everyone could kind of have something like that to kind of like shake them up a little bit and be like, life is not that serious. There's bigger things out there, than the daily stuff. That stuff doesn't really matter. It'll all get done eventually, and I don't have to. Doesn't have to consume my mental space. So,
Yeah. It's just a
hope
small
that makes
thing.
sense. I don't know if that makes
Oh
sense at
no,
all.
yeah, you're good. You're fine. Sounds like well, given all your experience though, it sounds like you have some great lessons that you could teach your kids, I'm sure, from all this.
I hope so. I've told people before, like, my biggest goal in life is just to participate in life. I love skiing with my kids. I don't want to miss out. I don't want to be on the sidelines, and I don't want them to have these memories like when they're grown and like reflecting on their childhoods with their spouses or with their friends. I don't want them to look back and be like, oh well, it's just too bad mom was disabled. It was too bad mom couldn't go on that trip with us to go camping or backpacking or skiing or fishing or whatever. I want them to look back and be like, dang, mom was a badass. Like, she participated in everything and she had every excuse to not. Um, Man, mom did more than dad did. I'm kidding. Joe does plenty. But I want them to reflect and that have those memories. And right now they don't see it that way. And I just want them to be proud of me. I want them to grow up and be like, we had a full life with an active mom who got to participate fully in our sports, in our activities, and just live life. And that's my biggest goal out of all of this, is just to be able to do that. And there are going to be things that I can't do, and I acknowledge that as well. With the skiing, like, I thought I had much more time before they were ripping down black diamonds, but they are starting to get faster than me. So I'm a very much like a green skier. I like to be able to breathe and not go into the trees and not just focus on not dying on the hill. And I thought for that they would be bunny hill kids for a lot longer, but we've been very successful in getting them out skiing, and now they are wanting to do blues and wanting to go faster, and that's all great, but I don't want to keep up with them.
That's fine. That's awesome. Sounds like you guys have a great time together.
Yeah, we try.
So you mentioned that you're talking about mentors and stuff like that within the team. So is there someone that's like really impacted your journey so far, whether it be with adaptive soccer or kind of in the veteran community as you're kind of going through and figuring out the adaptive stuff?
I think everyone I've met has played some kind of role in developing me as a person. Um, Even some of the girls that are fresher or newer to the community. Um, I think I couldn't name just one. Um, I think one of my teammates, Tracy, she was a mentor to me very early on. She's also hemipelvectomy amputation. She's been one for about 20 years now. And she was, when I got pregnant with my oldest, was the only other person in the world that I had known that had had my same amputation, who had pregnancy safely and had a child. There was even my doctors couldn't find any medical literature out there on cases like us. And so very early on, she was my kind of go-to person. Then when soccer happened, I called her. She was like, "Oh, that looks neat." I'm like, please come do this with me." And so what's cool is, like, we've been friends for 10 years now, but soccer has given us an opportunity to get closer to each other because we talk more. We have opportunities to see each other. When we went to Poland, We rented a little Airbnb and hung out for a couple extra days and just went up to dinner and went sightseeing in Warsaw. And so she's very near and dear to my heart. But all the women on the team, I mean, like I said, they're all so different from different backgrounds and different perspectives and different goals that they're going after and achieving. And the advocacy they're doing really inspires me to continue to try to like give back and pay it forward. Because it can be, like I said, just very easy to just kind of slip into a routine and just chug along. But then meeting women that are maybe a little bit earlier in their journey that are still like fired up about it and want to get out there and um, give back and educate and find resources for those that don't have resources. I'm like, I need to be doing that too. Why am I not doing that? And then just all the people that have come before me too, that have been on that journey, and the people that I competed in Invictus and Team Air Force. We still communicate all the time, and it's been cool to see how our lives post recovery have, evolved. People have gone down different career paths, accomplished things, gotten married, had children, gone on to compete at different levels or try different sports. Um, so yeah, it's neat to just witness all the people that I've met.
Yeah, it sounds really amazing. It sounds like instead of it being more of a mentor, it sounds like everybody kind of helps everybody. Everybody pitches in, gives advice and things like that. But is there like, but have you found yourself feeling like more of a mentorship role with someone though, or kind of as just everybody collectively?
Yeah, definitely collectively. I think what has been interesting to me lately in this past year in like with the soccer is I know that funding and different like resource constraints exist. Like I'm not naive to know that that's not a thing, but I think I've definitely taken it for granted how fortunate I've been. I mean, very early on in my journey, didn't go seeking adaptive sports. It was forced upon me. It was not given an option. It was, hey, you're gonna go do this. You're gonna go try this. Um, and I was very lucky to have that. And then just being a military veteran, it's not perfect, but we are, taken care of and provided a certain level of care and a certain level of resources and um, certain mobility aids through the VA and equipment. And my needs are met, and is what I'm trying to say. Like, and they've always been met. And I've been very fortunate to receive training and funding and grants and things to make my life easier. And I've just chugged along with that, knowing that like that doesn't come as easy to other people. It wasn't until I started like branched out from like veteran based sports and organizations that people were like, oh, well, I've been disabled my whole life or for a period of time. And it's been really hard to break into the adaptive sports world. When I first heard someone say that, it's like, it was hard. Like there's all these organizations out there. What do you mean it was hard to get into the adaptive sports world? You just look one up and you go join it. And that part, I was very naive to that part, only because I've always been given like the opportunity to join these organizations because it was just easier on some level for me to find them because I had been networked into it so early that I knew what questions to ask and I knew where to go find them and I knew the points of contact to reach out to if I had a need. And so to meet people, not just women, but just like people with disabilities that have struggled to get funding or just to get the equipment they need or even just find an organization to become a member to, that was eye opening for me and something that I've tried now to really focus effort on, like the people that I meet that might not have the resources that I've been given to try to connect them with the right organizations and try to find those grants or um, the different facilities that might cater to their needs or might be able to provide just resources or coaching or just information, if anything. And I really want to continue to mentor in that capacity, I think, because the more I meet and the more conversations I have with people and seeing firsthand, making these relationships with people that are not, have struggled to just get a wheelchair, is interesting. There's a big legislative movement right now. It's called the So Everybody Can Move Act, and I forget how many states have passed it. But for a long time, insurance providers would only provide a walking leg. And any legs, like a running leg or a sports leg, were considered not necessary and would have to come out of your own pocket, which is ridiculous. And so there's a big movement to try to change laws across the US to get insurance companies to pay for athletic legs so that people can be active and get out there and do sports, because that's so important to all realms of your health, right? And just to be an active participant in life. And so I hope to be able to contribute in that, because I have received so much throughout my journey and so much support that I would love to pay it forward in any way I can. What's funny is every time I try to pay it forward by participating and going and mentoring in some capacity, I am still receiving tenfold. Like, I go and sign up to be a mentor to somebody somewhere, to introduce them to a sport or just an organization, or help them through the process of trying to get a scholarship through whatever to participate. And I leave feeling like I've received more than I've given, even though I'm like trying my hardest to give back. I still continuously just, it pours into me, it fills my cup. And those are all good things. So hopefully I can just continue to find spaces to try to do that in a way that's meaningful, that makes sense, to try to use some of the skills I've developed and do that. Don't say no. Say yes. I've run into so many people. This morning, I talked to a girl who has some physical disabilities, and she had wanted to go to an event, and she was like, "Well, I looked at the list, and because I'm not in a wheelchair, I don't think I could have participated in any of these things." And I was like, you still go. You still go, because you would be very surprised. Like, the adaptive community is all about being creative and finding a way, and finding a way that might not look the way you expected it to look. And that's something I've learned and had to accept. Like, you have to put aside your preconceived ideas of what something might look like and just be open to trying it a different way. And you might be very surprised. And even if it isn't your cup of tea or the way you want to do it, it's still about networking and meeting that community. Like, sure, you felt like you couldn't do whatever sport. One, maybe you could have been wrong about it and you could have tried it. Or two, you could have supported others that are trying that and really been inspired, or just met somebody that might know something that you don't know. So I think my biggest piece of advice is just to find those opportunities. But even if the opportunity doesn't look exactly like that mold that you're trying to fit into, try it anyway. You might be very surprised. I got to go out to Phoenix, and one of the events I wanted to sign up for, because I just thought it sounded interesting, was adaptive canoeing. And I thought I knew what that meant. Like, it meant, I don't know, like a certain seat, or, I mean, I can canoe. You're sitting down and it's a paddle and you're on the water, and maybe I don't see any agitation there. Like, okay, cool. And I went, and the group that was leading it, Team Makapo, they're all blind. They're a blind canoe team, and they were incredible. And I learned so much from them. And it was fascinating to hear the technology they're developing, and also the races they do in Hawaii, where they go like 40 something miles and they trade off. And some of the guys like launch off the guide boat and they get like swooped up and pulled into this canoe because they don't slow down or stop, and they're blind and they're doing this. And it's just like, I did not expect that. And my life is so much fuller because I've met them. And like, sure, I'm not a blind kayaker or a blind canoeer, but if I meet anybody now going forward that is visually impaired, they're a resource that I know about, that I can point them in that direction. And I think in the adaptive sports world, because we are such a community, you gotta participate. You gotta put yourself out there, even if it's not your sport or what you're passionate about, just to network and find resources for yourself and for other people. And then just also like just spur some of that outside of the box thinking. Like, see how you can take some of the skills somebody else is doing, or some adaptation somebody else is doing for something completely separate, and apply it to something that you're struggling with in your life. So I would
That's
encourage everyone to just and try it.
That's incredible that those people that are visually impaired are canoeing. That is awesome.
Mhm.
I bet that was
Yeah.
very interesting to see.
Yeah, they're a great group. I would love to go paddle with them again. They're really awesome.
So, kind of going back to um, people helping out adaptive people when they see them, like in the grocery store. You mentioned the Costco, the lady helping you. Are there like some other misconceptions or things that society probably should understand about adaptive individuals that you would maybe want to tell people?
So that one's really tricky because at the end of the day, we are each individuals, right? Like you
Yeah.
cannot. The biggest thing is you just can't make a blanket assumption on this disabled community. There are going to be people out there that getting out of the house was their biggest accomplishment that day, and they may need you to help them. And so you just can't assume. You can't look at somebody and be like, oh, they probably got it or they don't got it. The biggest thing is if you're able to just communicate, make an interaction, treat people with respect, and just get to know them first, especially if it's somebody that you're going to be interacting with a lot, especially if you work with them. Just get to know them first before you jump to your own conclusions on what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. And just trust that there are, especially if they're adults, just trust that they will communicate with you what their needs are if there are needs. Um, a lot of times where I get frustrated with people making assumptions about me is especially like if people approach me and ask what happened, I'm like, I don't even know your name. Like,
Hmm.
hi, how are you? My name's Sarah. Like, it's nice to meet you. Can we start with that before you just want to know? Or you've made an assumption that I'm a combat injured veteran. You thank me for my service. Like, I mean, I did serve and I appreciate your support, but like, you're jumping to a conclusion here and I'm uncomfortable with it. And I
Okay.
don't, yeah. So I think a big thing is just to make connections with people because we're still just see them as an individual, as a person, first and foremost. Um, I think another thing, at least for me personally, and again, like everyone reacts differently, but if you offer me help once, that's great. I'm going to thank you and I'm going to appreciate it. And if it's not something I'm open to, I'm going to politely say no, thank you. And if you offer it again a second time, I'll probably also play. If you insist or you press or you offer it continuously, I'm going to feel like you don't respect me as a person and you aren't willing to listen to me. And that in some way you are also trying to strip away my independence that I've worked so dang hard to achieve, and you're diminishing my accomplishments. And I mean that's heavy. Like that's really like let's jump into like a very like you've offended me deeply. But a lot of times when someone's like very insistent over and over again, when I've clearly said no, thank you, that's how I feel. I just feel like you're not listening to me and you're not respecting me as the person that I am. I'm not being stubborn. Um, I'll ask for help when I need help. Most time, sometimes I am stubborn. If anything, when people are very insistent, I almost want to triple down and be like, "Let me show you." Versus people that are, polite about it. Like I'm much more willing to accept that help. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
No,
I
it
don't
does,
know.
and I appreciate you saying that because, like, I'm on the outside looking in, and like, granted, with the physical therapy mind that I have, right, or going into that,
Mhm.
I know that it's like, hey, the patient they need to do it themselves, and so I get both sides, but it's like nice for someone to say, hey, we're capable, we're also humans, like you said, hi, my name's Sarah, so I really appreciate you kind of
Mhm.
saying that and really putting that out there for people to really understand. It gives them kind of an idea of like, oh, maybe I can step back and be like, let me see if they can get it first. And then if it looks like they're struggling, maybe I can step in. Hey, my name's so and so.
Yeah.
Did you need help with that? And if they say no, okay,
Mhm.
you know. But yeah, and I appreciate your insights on that.
Yeah. I think my favorite way, I was talking to some friends about this because we were traveling. I think my favorite way someone has offered it was just a straight up, let me know if there's anything I can do to make your life easier. And then
Mm,
they just stepped away. And they didn't ask again. They just left the ball in my court. The offer's out there. I heard it and acknowledged it. But it wasn't like, oh, do you need help with that specifically? Or can I get that for you? It was just, let me know if there's something I can do. And that's a very human thing to do. Like, I do that to able-bodied people. Like if I see them like with a bunch of kids or something, or cooking dinner, or just going to, someone's house. Like, is there anything I can do to help you? Like, it's just very generic, but the offer is out there. You've presented yourself as somebody that is willing to assist, but you're not pushing for it. Like, you're not assuming or insisting. And I think I appreciate that approach personally the most.
Okay, I'm still in it then.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that and use it as mine now. Perfect.
Because I also don't want you to ignore the fact that I'm disabled. I mean, it's part of who I am. I'm not pretending that I'm not. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky waters, especially. I mean, I know early on in my journey, I was very stubborn and probably rude about accepting help because I wanted to prove to the world that I was still capable and able. And so I wasn't in the right headspace to have those interactions from like a stable point. So, um, again, each person is just in their own journey and their own path with their own personalities and their own ways of life. So,
I got you. Well, Sarah, thanks again for your insights and all your information. Is there anything you kind of want to
yeah,
add towards the end of the podcast or anything, or something you'd like to say?
no, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you just being interested in all of this, and just advocating in your own way and spreading information. And I mean, education is very important. These things should be talked about. So I'm really grateful for you and for what you're doing here.
Oh, well, I'm grateful for you guys saying yes to these interviews. This is fun. I love connecting with people. So that's why I'm choosing physical therapy too. Is just connection you make with people is amazing.